Good evening, my friends. It's Friday night. I'm going into Kansas City to play music with two old friends. Known these guys almost half a century. That's one of those things you can't have until you get old. It's friends for 50 years. Getting old ain't all bad. I'm completely committed this evening to the high energy world. I'm using a high energy automobile. I'm recording into a high energy cell phone. I've got my high energy pedal steel guitar in the back, a high energy solid state amplifier, all that stuff. So I'm not, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I understand that I live with feet in two worlds, and it's difficult to do otherwise, or at least for me. I got a bottle of water. I got a Subaru. That background noise you hear, that's the noise of our lives, except usually we can't hear it, but once it's been recorded on a video and then the video's played, we can hear it. But that's just the noise that the Subaru makes, and it's a fairly quiet car, I mean, it's not a Lexus or something, but it gets me around, and it doesn't burn too much gas, and it hauls all my stuff. And I live in the high energy world. Every time I leave the farm, almost every time I leave the farm, I'm in. Oops, sorry about that. High energy world. Turned that corner too fast, didn't I? Let me get up here to this stop sign and slow down. That was, geez, I'm going on every bit of 25 miles an hour. If you spend your life walking, these speeds all feel really fast. I discovered that when I got home from Vietnam. I spent a year during which mostly I either walked or rode in a helicopter. And when I got home from walking for a year, everything sure seemed fast. At 21 years old, and everything was just going zoom. I haven't ever totally recovered from spending the 21st year of my life walking. In some ways it did me a lot of good. I live in this high energy world, but I question it. My friends, my followers, my listeners all know that. And so tonight I'm going to just talk. I'm not going to narrate this ride. I'm just going to ignore the ride, except talk to you like you were a person riding along with me. You're sitting right where a person riding along with me would be. Your eyes are about the same height as my eyes, more or less here. I'll keep you from falling over too often if I can. It's kind of a handful sometimes. But, and I'm trying not to wreck the car. Mostly where I drive, there's a fair amount of empty space around me, so I have a little more time to bumble and bumfuzzle than most people. My car's got this computerized cruise control where I just say, go 55, and it goes 55, and I don't have to think. And if it gets up close behind somebody who's going 52, then it goes 52, It's like, I acknowledge how much fun all this computerized stuff is, I'm no fool, I live here. But imagine a world in which every single individual human being had direct access to enough resources to stay alive. Just as a birthright for being a member of the human race on a healthy, vigorous, productive planet Earth. It is literally possible. But just imagine what it would be like. You know, everyone knows the way we live. That is to say, it's been our lives, all our lives. And we know how to do it. We know how to live it. We know how to drive our cars and look over our left shoulders when we come to a yield sign. We know how to do this stuff. It's just our lives. We do it. But this life is not inevitable. This life is one that occurred as a result of an incredible number of individual choices and individual steps, none of which were inevitable. One of the steps was simply that we started eating annual plants instead of perennials. And that started in about 10 or 11 different places. The most recent research that I've read anyway. And from there it has spread over the entire world. And the reason it has spread over the entire world, my theory of why it spread over the entire world disagrees with the predominant theory. So I'm just going to tell you mine. Neither of us can prove this because we weren't there and didn't watch it happen. By the way, the cruise control thingy is set at 60 here. We're just cruising 60 miles an hour. And mile a minute. This is the walking pace of America. I'm going a mile a minute. That's what we consider to be the norm, where for the last 6,000 years, people considered the pace of a walking horse to be the norm, or the pace of a walking human. And they're really not too different. Horses and humans walk at very similar paces. Donkeys and humans walk at almost identical paces. And that was the natural speed. That was walking pace. That was how people got around the world. And now, today, walking pace is a mile a minute. And we don't benefit from that in any way. The theory is that this is all better because we can get where we're going. But before we had all these things, human societies were more compact, and all the things that everyone needed were in a smaller area. Anyway, people invented this agriculture stuff. And now it's covered the whole world. And the reason that I say that it covered the whole world was because in the 8 or 10 places where it was invented, they completely destroyed the ecosystem. They stripped off the biosphere, they stripped off the topsoil, they chased away the water, and then they couldn't raise any food anymore, so they had to go somewhere and overthrow somebody else's land and take their land and cut it all down and do it again. I think the general theory is based on some hypothesis that annual grain agriculture was superior, but to me there's not much support for that hypothesis. I just did something that you can't do sitting over there, which is I turned down my sun visor. So this part of the film is going to be pretty bright, perhaps. The theory is, okay, let me back up a little from there. Let me not go to the theory. The historic fact is that for 250,000 years, give or take, all the humans on Earth were able to eat just by walking around picking up food. And nobody had a job, and nobody had to work, and nobody had any money, and nobody needed it. Pretty early in the process, way back, at least, I don't know how long, way early, way before agriculture, we discovered trading with each other. And, you know, I had some black rock that broke into something real sharp that would make a terrific knife. you had a bunch of long straight sticks that I could throw at animals and eat them, and we traded, you know. And to people, that's hardwired into humanity. We know it. But nobody had a job in the sense that we all have jobs. 250,000 years. And I can't stress enough that these are people just like us. Now, there's some quibble. Some people have a theory that at 50,000 years ago, there was a language revolution that happened overnight in geological terms. And we became what is called behaviorally modern humans. People who act just like us, except they didn't drive cars. But they had the same hopes and dreams and schemes and love affairs and cheated on their wives and husbands and did things that they'd be embarrassed of in the morning and did things that they'd brag about for the rest of their life. They were just people just like us, you know. And they went on like that for at least 40,000 years, minimum, absolute minimum, 40,000 years. And all they did was walk around the world and eat stuff, and they never had to work. The stuff was just there. It fell off the trees. It grew on the plants. They walked around and picked this up and ate it. Picked this up. You know, we don't know a lot about how they housed themselves, because what we do know is that most of what they housed themselves in was vegetative matter and has long since returned to the biosphere in another form somewhere. And but they were people just like us, you know. And then in about 10 places, like I said, we invented this. What you're looking at here, this is annual grain agriculture in all its radiant glory, January version. It's like this every January. Roughly half the land surface of the United States of America, that's a real number. It's actually slightly more than half of the land surface of the United States of America looks just like that right now. Over half the country is dead. It is not absorbing carbon. It is not raising any kind of living thing. We cut down a forest that made food every day to do this. Now, the theory is, and I can hear you already, while the world couldn't support this many people if we didn't do it this way, we know for sure that this system does not produce the most food that could be produced on that land. We know that. Everybody knows that. There's no dispute. It's just known that multi-layer crops that grow year-round can produce more total carbohydrates, fats, and protein per acre of that land than that system out there does. So therefore, it is provably false that we couldn't have this many people as hunter-gatherers. We'd have more food than we do now. In hunter-gatherer societies, all the resources were within walking distance of somebody. And wherever somebody was, all the resources that that person needed were within walking distance. Now, we have, over the centuries, gotten fat and lazy and gotten lots of big stuff. And we claim that's better, but I don't believe it is. I'm kind of what you call a one-trick pony. No matter what problem you tell me about that exists in the modern world, from school shootings to Donald Trump to these dead farm fields to climate change to the ecosystem catastrophe, no matter what problem you ask me about, I have only one answer. It's the same answer for everything. park all the airplanes, start tomorrow planning and working in the direction of turning this country into an automatic, self-powered, food-producing machine which runs on atmospheric carbon dioxide. Now, when I said, what if everybody had access to all the resources they needed? The resources we need are food, and water, and air, and shelter, and physical comfort, no pain. We need, pretty much need the respect of our fellow humans. We need to feel like we're worth having around. We need to have something we do that seems productive. We need all those things. And in today's world, the things that we do to feel productive, for instance, are based on the things that are available within the economy and technology we live in. So people say, I don't want to go live in a little house with a garden someplace. I want to live in a city. And I understand that. That's all you ever did. It's what you know, and you've made a good life out of it. And why not keep a good life? And that's perfectly sensible. However, speaking not of yourself, but of the generations to come, because they always will. It is pretty much known by now from, mental health science and just science in general. It's pretty much known that all human beings respond positively to direct productive interaction with the earth on which we live. Stanford University, somebody in Britain someplace did research, and they proved that so many hours a week of interaction with the nature had a positive, measurable mental health benefit. I know this sounds, a lot of the things I think just are so basic and so obvious. People laugh at me for saying them, but we all live like they weren't true. We evolved on this earth. We are literally physically made of this earth. That is to say, we started out as one cell, or as two half cells, or as two other people, or wherever you want to start it. But at some point there was one cell, okay? And now today I weigh about 200 pounds. Okay, so you can even leave out, you don't even have to account for the one cell. Here comes somebody who's in a hurry. But of me personally, the 200 pounds is all made of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, water, and other earth parts. And the way they got from out there to in here was through the process called life. This thing called life was able to take all that dirt and one cell and make this particular storyteller out of it. We don't exactly know how, but that's observably true. We can see that it has happened. And so I'm made out of this earth, and everybody else is too. And of course we react positively to interacting with it. We're part of it. We're literally, physically, measurably, this is not a hypothesis, you can prove it, part of this earth, parts of that planet out there that you're looking at, got up off that ground and marched over here and got in this body, and now it's driving this car. We're all one thing, provably all one thing, and we respond well to it, and it cares for us. Let's talk for a moment about the theory that the earth could not produce enough food without us ripping its hide off to feed a huge number of humans. Let's say 10 billion human beings. Okay, this same planet produced enough food to feed all those dinosaurs, and they were really big, and there were lots of them, and they had lots of body mass. And this planet, they didn't go out here and peel off the flesh of the earth and say, there, now it'll feed me. They just went out there and ate. They weren't smart enough to mess it up. So this biome that we're looking at, this is a big river savanna biome. And what you're looking at ahead of you as you go up those hills, those are the natural hills that the glaciers pretty much pushed down here and left here. And all the flat parts that you see, the river carved all that. The reason it's flat is because the Missouri River has run over it at some time. And so that's what makes it a riverine ecosystem as well. But all these hills used to look not terribly unlike they look now, okay? There was grassy areas and there was trees. And some of them now here in this particular part of the state are more heavily forested than they were then because there were frequent fires. And but the difference between what we have now and what came then was that the grassy part made animals we could eat, and the trees part gave off nuts and seeds and fruits that we could eat. And we could also, out in the grassy parts, and this is in the perennial grassy parts, strip off seeds and eat them. That's why we have these hard molars. You know, we can eat some pretty hard seeds, so, but we didn't strip the surface off the earth and make it grow one annual crop. I have a theory about how that started, and I will share it with you. These big rivers, like we've been driving through these river flats, they're flood every year. You know, up in the highlands it snows, and the snows build up all winter, and then in the spring they melt, because swoosh, and the river comes down here and it just flushes the whole valley. That's a properly functioning ecological process. Now, every place the river strips off everything except dirt, or every place it doesn't strip off stuff, the river actually just drops dirt on top of the land. Now down here now, it drops sand on top of the land, but that's because we've screwed it up. We've made it narrower and faster than it used to be. And so that additional energy causes it to carry sand instead of just silt. It's that simple, real simple. Nobody could possibly fail to understand that. So when it floods, now it drops sand on all this ground. And the farmers scream bloody murder. But the only reason they got the ground is because the river used to be so much wider. Anyway, where the river got out and flooded the ground and deposited silt, and then when it went back between the banks, that bare silt was going to do one of two things. It was either going to grow down here cottonwoods or annual grass. And it kind of depended on who got in there first, because if the cottonwoods got in there first, they'd shade out the annual grass, and if the annual grass got in there first, it'd outcompete the cottonwood seeds. So it just depended on what time of year the flood receded as much as anything. And but every place that happened, then the people who lived along this river could go over there and eat those annual grass seeds, and it was a reliable, perpetual source of food and energy. And we know for sure that what they call the cradle of civilization, and one of the very first places we ever thought this up, was between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And we also know for sure that is just an absolute desolate desert today. Where did all that dirt go? We pissed it away with annual grain agriculture. And then we had to go out of that spot and go overthrow somebody else and conquer them and take their land and plow it. And now we've got almost the last few square feet, and we're encroaching on the last few people who just manage a functioning ecosystem to provide them food. And we're going to kill them too. We're killing their forest that provides them food, even as we speak. Every person on earth could have personal, ready access to enough resources to stay alive without ever touching money. Now, could we have something like what we have now? Well, I think we could. You know, if you ever happen to read The Lord of the Rings, not see the movie, but read it. Well, even seeing the movie would help some. You know of the Hobbit Society. Now, those hobbits were fashioned after really good people. What he did was he took all the best characteristics he could think of in the good people he knew around England, in small English villages, and he made them into hobbits. And they had homes, permanent homes, and many of us could. Some of us all still are already nomads. I mean, the difference between a truck driver and a nomad is that the truck driver causes climate change. There's no other significant difference. There will always be nomads. So some people are going to have permanent homes, and they're going to live around a chestnut forest, and they're going to live around an oak forest, and they're going to live around a bunch of mulberry trees, and they're going to live around a bunch of beaver ponds, and the beaver ponds are full of fish, and the nomads come wandering through from time to time with their cows, and they trade some of this for some cow meat. This is all as possible, and in terms of physical possibility, as realistic as the life we live. And it could be just, we could move one person at a time, one family at a time, one farm at a time, from where we are now to there. That's how you do it. You don't wait for the government to come in and stomp on everybody and say, okay, be hobbits. That's not how it works. But we could create a world, but we couldn't go fast. You see, the deal is, this whole speed is not compatible with that. This road is just, ever since I started talking to you, we've been driving on the corpses of former biomes. If we want this world to support us in the style to which we would love to become accustomed, we have to return all the biomes to health, because all the biomes together is what provided for humanity all the resources that they needed, and all the biomes together are what provided for the dinosaurs all the resources they needed, and that's how an ecosystem works. We evolved on this planet, more or less in some savanna, probably, to utilize its resources directly. That's how evolution works. We like to talk like we believe in science, but live like we believe in divine creation. We were not created separately from this world. We are not made of separately from this world. We are this world. We are literally this world. And, you know, I've gone out tonight to play music with my friends. And I'm glad to have that opportunity to do that. But it's really hard now because I just hate to leave my farm. Now, that's partly because I'm old. You do get that way when you get old. But I'm telling you that the more, and I walk on this farm to do my work. I don't drive stuff around. The only time I drive anything is when I need stuff that one of the trucks can haul that I can't haul, and that Abe and I can't haul. And most of what we do, we can haul. The rest, I drive the tractors once in a while, but I really, the more I walk on that farm, I see everything. When I walk across a pasture, I see every spot. I see where this topsoil is bare, where the topsoil has got plants on it, and I see what those plants are. And it is, there is room for endless learning. I will never stop learning. If, you know, the last day I ever walk out on this land, I will learn something new. And that's because the things of value are subtle. And we boast of our knowledge, but really most of our knowledge is speed. You know, we have the bigger the internet gets, the more worthless the facts you can find on Google become. And we have infinite access to shallow dribble and virtually no access to depth of understanding of how this world works. There's nothing I've ever learned. I grew up with all this, you know, I've had all the computers and all that shit. Did that for a living for most all my life. And there's nothing I ever learned that was as interactive and complex as the reality of a growing, producing earth. And I don't know squat about it. I wish I'd started at this level walking 40 years ago. Well, it's been not quite 40 years since I moved out here, but 37 or 8 years ago when I moved from the city to the country. But no, I had to have fast enough because that's how you did it. You know? And it's our speed is destroying the world upon which we live. Our agriculture and our speed. And it is commonly said that those are two things that humankind will never give up. And should that be the case, then it will be taken from us. Because the things that we have and the things that we do, we can either lay them down or they will be taken from us. I believe that to be true. I can't prove it. Most people talk about climate change, and then from there they go directly to new ways to maintain our current speed and our current everything else. And I have no use for that worldview. I mean, we can't. It is. I feel reasonably secure that we cannot rip the life off the surface of this earth and survive without it. And we clearly are. I mean, you know, we've turned most of the farmland of planet Earth into desert, and the only way we could fix that right now would be for a bunch of really smart people to patiently go in there and start managing water and perennial growth and bring back the tiniest little bits of life that you can get to come, and then build on those bigger bits of life. The reason those lands became desert was because we tore off more and more and more and more life. It is a simple scientific known fact that Everything alive here is alive because of life before it. Nobody knows exactly how the first one got there, but we know absolutely for sure that from that first living cell to ourselves today, every stage of increase of life has been driven by the currently present and previous life on the planet. Life builds life. Death builds death. We're killing this planet one piece at a time on purpose. We're paving it. There shouldn't be a road like this in the world. I could do a whole dissertation on different ways that this road and the cars on it are themselves ecosystem destroyers, and it wouldn't matter if these cars were running on wound up rubber bands. They would be just as destructive as they are now. It's not the fuel that's killing the world. The fuel's just making the world hotter. Anyway, I'm getting into busy neighborhoods here. I'm going to have to pay more attention. I'll see y'all later.